News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
(9:30) on Tuesday the 30th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So, DUP deal reached. An agreement has been reached to restore power sharing in Northern Ireland and get Stormont up and running. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has the latest.
Why are we leading on that?
Well, good morning and welcome. Hello, good morning and welcome to Belfast. Yes, Stormont is to be up and running within the next few days. DUP's message, we jumped, now you jump. As legislation goes through the House, it should see Stormont by Saturday.
Rail strikes in England. The Prime Minister demands that rail companies use those new powers passed by the government to bring in minimum service levels during the strikes. We'll find out why not a single one of them is doing so.
And the French farmers are furious. We're looking at live pictures here in Paris where hundreds, I'd say thousands of tractors are forming a blockade into the city. With a vow to cut off food, farmers are furious at French and European rules.
Could it be coming here? A mortgage misfortune. Don't you feel sorry for him? The Tory MP George Foreman quit his £120,000 a year ministerial job because he couldn't afford his mortgage repayments. They increased from £800 to £2,000 a month. Do you feel sorry for him? I don't. Does he know how much?
We've got a lot more as well
Do you feel sorry
this
for that
morning.
man?
I do feel sorry for anybody who has taken out a mortgage that they feel they can afford and suddenly these interest rates have pushed them into a place that is just not sustainable. And actually, yes, he does earn plenty of money, etc. But you know, he won't be alone.
I wonder if the fact he had a divorce may have more to do with it. Did you tell us that when you resigned as Minister, Mr Freeman? Come on and talk to us about it. We'd be delighted.
There's no doubt about that. And we were fascinated yesterday with this news of Rishi Sunak not eating for 36 hours every week. Well, we're going to find out why, what it might mean for him. Does he get really angry on a Monday afternoon when he's having a meeting because he hasn't eaten anything for so long? Let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, the very latest news with Sam.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much, and good morning from the GB Newsroom. The headlines just after 9:30. Well, our top story this morning, Northern Ireland's top unionist party have announced they will end their boycott of the government and return to power sharing. The party has refused to take part in government for more than 700 days in protest against post-Brexit trade arrangements. The DUP say they will now back a deal if new legislation is passed in Parliament. Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has hailed what he described as the welcome and significant news and made it clear the government will deliver on its end of the deal. Meanwhile, commuters are facing more travel disruption as train drivers launch fresh walkouts in their long-running dispute over pay. The ASLEF union is accusing the government of giving up trying to resolve the row. Train operators are urging passengers to only travel if absolutely necessary. The strikes were expected to be the first test of new legislation to enforce minimum service levels. Shop prices rose at their slowest rate in more than 18 months in January. Inflation reached near record highs last year, prompting a cost of living crisis. However, discounts and lower prices for milk and tea saw shop price inflation fall to 2.9% from 4% in December. Overall, prices are still going up, though, at the shops, but at a slower rate. In other news, HSBC has been fined more than £57 million for serious failings in customer deposit protection. It's the second highest penalty ever imposed by the financial watchdog. Under post-financial crash rules, deposits of up to £80,000 are safe in the event of a bank's collapse. HSBC incorrectly marked 99% of eligible deposits as ineligible, dating back to 2015. And millions of people in England can now access and view their prescriptions on the NHS app for the first time. NHS England say each repeat prescription order from the app saves GPs 3 minutes and saves patients 18 minutes with each online order. Health Secretary Victoria Adkins says it will ease pressure on pharmacists and cut waiting lists. And finally, billionaire Elon Musk has announced the first human patient to receive a brain chip from his company Neuralink and say they are recovering well. He says he hopes the product, called telepathy, will eventually allow users with disabilities like Stephen Hawking to communicate faster than an auctioneer. He says the initial results show promising neuron spike detection, meaning it could enable control of your phone or computer just by thinking. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Very good morning.
Morning. And extraordinary images coming from Paris. The siege of the capital city from furious farmers who are outraged at Macron's government's rush to net zero. The same rush to net zero we're doing here.
That's right. This is a global movement. So this is long lines of tractors we're looking at here who've blocked motorways at 8 entry points into the city. This is in France at the moment.
They say they're going to starve the city. That's and it's they're objecting to falling incomes, rising bureaucracy, but also it is the rush to net zero.
The government agency, ADEME, warns that Paris would only have 3 days of food supplies in the event of major disruption, but they're not alone, are they?
No, because we've had this in Germany and Poland, and there was a limited action in Scotland only last week in Ballater, which is, of course, just up the road from Balmoral, the King's official residence in Scotland.
Well, joining us now is a Welsh farmer, Gareth Wyn-Jones. Good morning, Gareth. Great to see you again. It started in the Netherlands, didn't it? First of all, I think the tractors, the farmers' dispute, and then it moved on to Germany and France, and as we see, we saw a small bit of protesting here last week in Scotland. Just remind our viewers what the key frustrations are on behalf of these incredibly necessary, hard-working men and women that put the food on our plates.
Well, you know, I'll bring it back to right at the beginning in Canada when it started a few years ago, where the truckers and the farmers went out to protest. A lot of it's to do with government policy, red tape, you know, bureaucracy. So they put legislations on farmers to grow things, and then they import cheaper food from other countries, which is wrong. You know, we should be growing our own food locally, sustainably, environmentally friendly. But, you know, it starts with the farmer, and farmers don't protest very easily. You know, it takes a lot for the farmers to go out because we've got jobs. I'm on my tractor now and feeding the sheep, you know. That's what we do 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And people have to understand, you know, we put our lives into this so they can have affordable food. We don't want to be thanked. We just want a fair price for, you know, what we're producing. And if government are putting more red tape and more legislation to these farmers, and of course, you know, trying to hit these net zero zero with stupid nitrate rules and you know, planting trees, putting solar farms on top quality agricultural land. It's a no-brainer. You know, we have to start to address these problems, and we have to start to ask questions of our politicians and start to say, you know, enough is enough. Because when a farmer will protest, you know, you're in trouble. You are either going to be really hungry very quickly, or if the government gets their way, they will just starve people slowly, and we will be sleepwalking into food shortages. So I've said it before, let's have a farming food revolution, and it seems to be happening worldwide in countries, and most probably the French are the best at it. You know, we can't say otherwise. You know, they protest. You know, I seen one taking a big bale into McDonald's the other day. I thought, oh my God. And then there's another. Look, there's a limit to what protests do as well. We don't want to harm other people's businesses and the general public either. But I think it needs to be looked at in, you know, in the bright sunlight and say, come on, let's get behind farmers. Let's ask our governments, what are they doing? Why are they making these legislations? Why are they putting red tape? You know, why are they taxing now the red diesel across Europe? You know, there's all these things will make such a difference for the general public, because their food will get a lot dearer.
Gareth, if they carry on making farmers like you plant trees and rewild your land so that you can't use the land for arable, or you get no compensation for that, is that going to lead, you think, possibly to similar tractor disputes in England? We saw a limited strike, similar protest in Scotland last week. Is it going to happen here?
I can't, you know, predict things, but the feeling I'm getting, there's a lot of frustrated farmers around. You know, there's a lot of people that feel that we're not, you know, we're not getting the opportunity that we should be. And I'm not against planting trees. You know, the right tree in the right place, there's not a problem with it. I planted 38 trees last year, all fruit trees. You know, my family's been on this farm for 375 years. Let's grow hedges and edges. Let's plant new hedgerows. You know, there's no problem with that. That's going to bring in carbon sink as well. But let's not just put these blanket policies across these places. You know, Wales now are talking about 10% of every farm going under trees. You know, if you're a farm on the seafront, every single tree is going to die. You know, right tree in the right place. Let's get these policies right. Let's work with people, because what we can't forget is we want to be feeding people affordably, you know, environmentally friendly, sustainably. There's so many hoops for us farmers to be jumping. I'll never forget, you know, mental health issues and suicides are very high in this industry, very, very high. There's a lot of pressure on these people, financially, you know, energy, fertilizer, feed costs, all these things. And I'll tell you straight up, it's not the supermarkets that will be taking the hit when it's 2 for the price of 1, or when they're dropping the price of milk. It's the farmer. It's the guy that's in the coalface, that's working to feed people every single day. And we need the public support, and we need the public to understand how frustrated we are, because we are here for you. Whatever your diet is, we are here to feed you.
All right, thank you, Gareth.
Great.
All the best, Catherine Jones.
And it's another reason why, when if you are in the supermarket and you're buying food, try and buy British farm produce.
Always.
Just try.
Yeah.
Just try. It might be a little bit more expensive, but we need people like Gareth.
Yeah, we do.
Otherwise, we are going to get these tractors coming here. I mean, it's getting closer. I saw a bit of it in Scotland.
And use your farm shops. If you're lucky enough to have one nearby, I know it can be more expensive. You know, it's very difficult, but we need to support these guys.
We do now. Big drama in Northern Ireland last night, because the DUP has finally endorsed a deal to return to power sharing in Northern Ireland after almost 2 years of protest. The meeting took place, well, it went on for 5 hours.
That's right. The deal is now subject to the UK government implementing the agreed legislation. We're joined by GBNews Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. Dougie, have you been up all night, and was this as dramatic as it sounds?
Yes, I have. I didn't get home till about 2:30 in the morning, and it was as dramatic as it sounded, right up to the room being monitored by political opponents, and then they were in turn tweeting out what was going on in the room at that stage. That's how the drama unfolded last night in Northern Ireland. But Jeffrey Donaldson had said that he wouldn't sign a deal unless it was the right deal. And of course, we've heard about it so much in Westminster, having to bring your party with you. So he had meetings with the party officers, then the executive itself. It was in a private estate outside Lisburn, between Lisburn and Balnahinch. And then at just about 1:30 in the morning, he arrived at a distillery outside Temple where the press were assembled. And he was questioned quite hard on the deal that he had signed. He said that that would be published within the next few days. But really, what he was saying, that what he had sold to his party only when the legislation had gone through Westminster to guarantee that, because don't forget, the DUP were promised by Boris Johnson, they were promised by Liz Truss, Article 16 was going to be fired, so they're never going to jump without that promise in beside them, and they have agreed to go back. And now there is certain things on this. You talk about farming. Farming is one of the biggest ones here in Northern Ireland, and it was very important that there is free access to the UK with agri-food products coming from Northern Ireland.
OK, thank you so much, Dougie Beattie there, on about 2.5 hours sleep, doing a sterling job in the sunshine.
And of course, we are going to be talking to Arlene Foster, former First Minister of Northern Ireland, a little later in the programme. Now, another week of complete hell in England if you're trying to use the train. Good luck.
Right. And also then if you're on the roads, because they are packed, because nobody's on the train. A week-long period of strike action begins by drivers today, as announced by the ASLEF union in its long-running dispute with the government over pay. Their General Secretary, Mick Whelan, spoke to GB News this morning.
It's been 5 years since some of my members have had a pay rise. We're not looking for a pay rise for the years, the pandemic years. 3 years ago, when inflation started going through the roof, like many other sectors, we asked for a pay rise. We then found out that the people, the privateers that we work for, had done a deal with the Westminster government not to give us a pay rise, and there's a move afoot to rip up our terms and conditions. We still went into negotiations of good faith, and they've behaved despicably.
Might have more sympathy for the train drivers if they weren't earning on average £60,000 a year before overtime and stuff. Now, this comes as the Prime Minister has urged rail operators to use the minimum service level powers that were introduced only at the end of last year. So why aren't they?
That's right. Well, we are the People's Channel. We always enjoy hearing what you think at home. Some of you got in touch to give your opinion on the train strikes. Let's have a look at what you had to say.
I believe that the rail strikes have been an absolute disaster for everybody. They're extremely well paid. They should get back to work, get on with the job that they're paid for, and if they don't want to do that, then they should leave.
When I hear there's another train strike coming, I think, oh great, here we go again. And quite frankly, I am just sick of them now.
The railway has come so unreliable with strikes. Surely the time now has come where ACAS needs to be involved and get both parties in a room, locked in there, knock their heads together and get it resolved.
Train drivers are some of the highest paid and luckiest workers in the country, and they are killing the industry.
Well, I think that the rail strikes that are still going on is pretty damn shocking, actually. People have to get to work, they have to visit loved ones in hospital, kids have to get to school. Stop striking! You've got a pretty good damn deal as it is. Unions, wind your neck in, please.
Well said.
I love that.
Well said.
Women like that could fix everything with a clipboard and a pot of tea. I've always said it.
Yeah, and actually, hearing the word ACAS, blimey, that takes you back to my teenage years when ACAS were on the television every night because there were strikes all the time.
Well, we're joined now by Christian Wilmer, who's a travel journalist and railway historian. Christian, they very much reflect the views of the nation, people there. The public is so tired of walking out of our front door and not knowing if there is going to be a train to get us where we want to go.
Yeah, I'm just as tired going on the media and talking about this because I've been doing it for about a year or 18 months. And it could be resolved. And let me say, both sides here bear a bit of blame. I mean, on the part of the unions, yes, they could be a bit more flexible and try and push it on. But most of the responsibility of the government. The trouble is, one of your speakers there said there's two parties involved, which is they were suggesting that it's just the rail firms and the unions, but there's a third party involved, and that's the government. And they're really driving this because they can resolve this dispute at a stroke. They could merely say, OK, we'll agree to your 5 or 6% pay rise and we won't impose any conditions. It's the fact that they've tied these two things together with conditions that are supposed to improve productivity or whatever. Those are negotiable, but they should just give in to the pay rise because actually, as Mick Whelan says, they haven't had one for 5 or 6 years.
Christian, if the pay rise came 6%, whatever it is, without the conditions, would ASLEF accept it?
Absolutely, absolutely. They've told me that. I've talked to them many times over the past.
Why are these conditions so onerous? What is it that's going to change
there's
dramatically?
Certain things that they want to reduce. For example, the time it takes to train a driver, which I think is a safety risk. They want to kind of make them work at all hours without any kind of extra compensation, rather than kind of fixed hours and so on. And yes, these guys get paid well. But, it's a very safety-critical job, and, they do work kind of difficult hours.
What happened to the government's much-vaunted minimum service legislation? Flagship legislation last year requiring 40% minimum service. Not a single train operator has taken it on.
Well, I have the inside story.
Good, we thought you would.
Because essentially, it's all very well Rishi Sunak saying, oh, yes, they should impose the minimum service level agreements. Apparently, according to my sources in the rail industry, they worked out a whole plan to do this, right, and spent months actually working out how to do this. It's not easy, right, because it's, the unions are going to be very hostile to this. And then at the last minute, the minister, and must have been under Mark Harper, the transport minister, but under orders from Number 10, just said, we're not going to do this, because they were too scared to provoke an absolutely massive row, which would have really closed the whole network for weeks.
Because I know LNER was one company that was going to do it, and as they've said, OK, the one-day strike will be 5.
Yeah, absolutely. But that would have been across the board.
But they shouldn't have blinked.
Well,
take them on.
That's not for me to say, but I think it would have led to real chaos and anger, and it was very difficult to do as well.
Right.
I mean, as Mick Whelan pointed out earlier, he said, well, maybe to get a 40% level service, you need 90% of the staff. So, how do you actually arrange that and organise it? The rail industry is a very difficult industry to test this out. They should maybe try it out.
But don't they have it in Europe? Similar rules?
They do, and it's been a patchy record. It hasn't actually worked that well. It's terribly difficult to drag people to work. You can always say, well, no, actually, I've got a cold.
Sick.
Yeah, I've got the flu. Oh, I've got childcare responsibilities. Can't do it. Sorry. So, to actually impose it is very difficult. And I think that's why they pulled out. But for Rishi Sunak to then say, oh, blame the train operating companies is completely unfair, because it was his decision.
Very interesting.
One of our viewers, Michael, has got in touch and says, these strikes, thank you, Michael, are 100% political. The UK needs to join the 21st century and ban antiquated trade unions. We need to invest and bring in technology and modern working practices. Let's get Britain working again. There is something about this dispute that it does feel quite old-fashioned in a way, isn't it? It is.
Yes.
Because the trade unions are playing such a strong role.
Well, that's because they're able to do so, because it's one of the rare industries where actually unions can pull out and stop the whole service, and there's nothing much really the companies can do about it. But, without unions, we still have, 12-year-old boys going up chimney sweep.
Yeah.
I mean, unions perform an amazingly important function in our society.
If Labour were in power, Christian, what would they do differently?
They would kind of cringe at this. They'd find it very difficult, right? But they would probably separate out the two, agree to pay rise, and then have long-term negotiations.
And are they going to take the rail companies back into public ownership?
They will take. They
eventually
will take that. They'll let the contracts run out. But remember, they're kind of in public ownership already, because since COVID, they no longer take the revenue risk. In other words, the fares don't go to them. They, in fact, go to the Treasury. And so there's actually not much in it for the private companies. They make a cut of about 2 or 3% of costs, and that's all they do.
But the directors do very nicely.
The directors do very well, and the HR people do very well, and the finance director does very well. All that stuff. It's completely unnecessary. So I'm totally with the idea of taking these back in-house.
Well, Christian, with your I was going to say, with your expertise on this, if you were given the job tomorrow of run the rail network in this country, what would you do?
If Keir Starmer is listening, I hope he does offer me.
Of course, he's listening.
The job. Yes, I hope he offers me the job. But I would actually just, your viewer talking about ACAS, just bang their heads together, sort it out, kind of separate out these issues, kind of just get rid of this kind of confrontational attitude. And I think that, you know, Labour are in a position to do that. It won't be easy because they can't give in to every demand because, you know, it will cost too much, but I think they would find a solution.
And do you think it will be easier if we have a Labour government? Because, as our viewer says, this is political. That is taken out of the equation to some degree because the trade unions are traditionally more Labour-leaning.
Yes, but, I mean, again, you know, you can't just give 100% of what unions want, and Labour has a slightly difficult relationship at times with unions. But, look, the trouble is we are in a limbo situation. You know, I know this is a channel that supports the Tories mostly, but, you know, we are...
these days. We find it very difficult quite often.
A bit of a stereotype we're not living up to.
I won't go into that, but you know, we are in this terrible limbo situation, and I think this is why these strikes are going on, because we've got this sort of, you know, government that everybody knows is not going to be there in a few months' time, and so everything is kind of paralysed. So, you know, bring it on. Let's hope that May the 2nd sorts this out one way or another.
May the 2nd?
Yes, May the 2nd.
You're going for an early election.
Yes, I'm going for an early.
I've got money on an early election.
You got an early election? Oh, good.
So we'll see. Yeah. I don't think you can risk a long hot summer with small boats cascading across the channel. I think
absolutely, and all the other messes and leadership kind of challenges and so on. So I'm with you, Andrew. Let's go for May the 2nd.
Always interesting.
Christian Walmart, thank you so much for joining us. Now,
he should run the railways, by the way. He couldn't do any worse a job, could he?
Still to come this morning, BBC staff have been told not to hire candidates who are dismissive of diversity. Is it time that we all come around to this way of thinking, or is this broadcaster...
Does that mean I'm not going to get a job at the BBC?
Way off the mark. You'd never get a job at the BBC.
I don't think I would.
I don't want one. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Very good morning to you. Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Whilst tomorrow is looking very windy for some of us, today it's actually going to turn largely fine and sunny. Yes, it's a bit of a cloudy start, particularly across central eastern parts of England, with some damp, drizzly weather for a time, but the thickest cloud and the outbreaks of drizzly rain clearing away towards the southeast as we go into the afternoon, with increasing amounts of sunshine following in behind and just a scattering of showers across western parts of Scotland. Temperatures will be around or a little bit below average for the time of year. Many places staying in single figures, but could get to highs of around 10 or 11 Celsius towards the south. Through this evening and overnight, we are going to stick with the largely clear skies across many parts, but turning increasingly cloudy across much of Scotland, and here the winds are really going to strengthen. That's due to a deep area of low pressure just to the north of the UK. That's going to bring some very strong winds as we go through tomorrow. Where we have clear skies across England and Wales, we could see temperatures dipping a little bit below freezing, so a touch of frost and some patches of fog to watch out for first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow and across much of England and Wales, it's actually going to be a largely dry day, but turning increasingly cloudy here. Meanwhile, for Scotland, a very wet picture as a squally front pushes its way southwards, could bring some heavy rain and some snow over the highest ground. That rain then pushing into parts of northern England and Northern Ireland later. Blustery showers following in behind with the risk of some hail, some lightning, and watch out for some very strong winds.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 30th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Rail strikes in England. The Prime Minister demands that rail companies use the new powers brought in by the government to bring in minimum service levels during strikes. So why aren't the operators using them?
French farmer fury. Hundreds of tractors are forming a blockade into Paris with a vow to cut off food as farmers are furious at French and European rules.
Royal recovery. Both the King and the Princess of Wales have been discharged from hospital following their operations. We'll have the latest.
And more BBC wokery. BBC staff are being told not to hire candidates who are dismissive of diversity and inclusion. Does that sound a little too divisive to you? And we've got a really interesting story that you don't want to miss. You'll be familiar with Christopher Hope, Chopper, our political editor. His wife Sarah and her mother and her daughter suffered a terrible road accident a few years ago. Sarah's been in Parliament. There's been a debate this morning, actually, about the penalties which should be dished out to people who commit road traffic offences. And she's going to be joining us.
Yeah, really interesting, very
You were
special.
with her on the day that she got the call?
I was with Chris when he got the call. His mother-in-law was killed by a runaway single-decker bus, and his daughter lost a limb. It was a terrible moment.
So don't miss that. Anyway, let us know your thoughts as well this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Andrew and Bev. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Sam Francis in the GB Newsroom. Well, first to some breaking news to bring you. We're hearing that a man has died after being shot by police in Southwark in south-east London. It's being reported that the man, believed to be in his 30s, was armed with weapons, including a crossbow, and was threatening to harm residents inside an address where officers responded to calls for help from the occupants of that property in Southwark. This is, of course, a developing story. We will bring you much more on that throughout the course of this morning. In other news, Northern Ireland's top unionist party have announced they will end their boycott of the government and return to power sharing. The party has refused to take part in government at Stormont for more than 700 days. That was in protest against post-Brexit trade arrangements. The DUP say they will now back a deal if the new legislation is passed in Parliament. Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has hailed what he described as the welcome and significant news and made it clear the government will deliver on its end of the deal. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says the move restores Northern Ireland's place in the UK.
This package, I believe, safeguards Northern Ireland's place in the Union and will restore our place within the UK internal market. It will remove checks for goods moving within the UK and remaining in Northern Ireland, and will end Northern Ireland automatically following future EU laws.
Commuters are facing more travel disruption as train drivers launch a fresh wave of walkouts in their long-running dispute over pay. Train operators are urging passengers to only travel if absolutely necessary. The strikes were expected to be the first test of new legislation to enforce minimum service levels. Downing Street has said it's disappointed that operators aren't using those powers to reduce the impact on passengers. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the government are trying to give up resolving the row.
It's been 5 years since some of my members have had a pay rise. We're not looking for a pay rise for the years of the pandemic years. 3 years ago, when inflation started going through the roof, like many other sectors, we asked for a pay rise. We then found out that the people, the privateers that we work for, had done a deal with the Westminster government not to give us a pay rise, and there's a move afoot to rip up our terms and conditions. We still went into negotiations of good faith, and they've behaved despicably.
But Housing Minister Lee Rowley says the strikes are unnecessary.
When the unions do the right thing for their members, where they're working for their members, that's fine. When they go out on strike unnecessarily, and this rail strike is an unnecessary strike, in my view, that's not acceptable. It's impacting hard-working people all across the country. It's a good example of why the government is taking difficult decisions, why the union-backed Labour Party is refusing to do so, and why the government should stand firm on these instances.
Well, we've heard this morning that immigration is due to add an extra 6.1 million people to the UK population by 2036. Those latest figures from the Office for National Statistics found the population is projected to hit 70 million by the middle of 2026. That's faster than was originally forecast. 67 million was the original estimate due to international migration. HSBC has been fined more than £57 million for what's being called serious failings in customer deposit protection. It's the second highest penalty ever imposed by the financial watchdog. Under the post-financial crash rules, deposits of up to £80,000 are safe in the event of a bank's collapse. HSBC, though, incorrectly marked 99% of eligible deposits as ineligible, dating back to 2015. Lord Cameron has announced that the UK will consider recognising a Palestinian state in a push to resolve the Israel-Hamas conflict. The Foreign Secretary hopes that it will add pressure on Israel and make a two-state solution irreversible. However, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remains strongly against the idea, saying it would endanger the state of Israel. It comes as Cameron makes his fourth visit to the Middle East, where he's expected to say that he will pledge to do everything the UK can to prevent the conflict from spreading across borders. In other news, Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for leaking state secrets. It's as the country prepares to hold elections next month. The former cricketer turned politician has been jailed before and has been jailed since August last year on corruption charges, which he says are politically motivated. His lawyer says they don't accept what they're calling an illegal verdict. Millions of people in England can now access and view their prescriptions on the NHS app for the first time. NHS England says each repeat prescription order from the app saves GPs 3 minutes and saves patients 18 minutes with each online order. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says it will ease pressure on pharmacists and cut waiting lists. Shop prices have risen at their slowest rate in more than 18 months in January. Inflation reached near record highs last year, prompting a cost of living crisis. However, discounts and lower prices for milk and tea saw shop price inflation fall to 2.9% from 4% in December. Overall, prices, though, are still going up in the shops, but at a slower rate. And finally, Elon Musk has announced that the first patient to receive a groundbreaking brain implant is recovering well. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in the region of the brain that controls movement. The billionaire says the first goal of the project is to enable people to control a phone or computer simply by thinking. He says initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning patients with paralysis and other neurological conditions could one day overcome their conditions. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom for now. For more, we're on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News. Now, though, more from Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. 10:08. It feels like a Wednesday today. Not that it's been a long week, Andrew. Don't take that personally. But doesn't it feel like we're later into the week?
It's like a long week every week with Bev.
You've been getting in touch at home. It's good job I'm not easily offended, isn't it? What have you been saying? Oh, they've all just disappeared at that very moment, so I can't tell you what we've been saying at home. See, that's kind of...
Well, we've got interesting people in the studio we can talk to instead.
We do indeed.
Yeah.
So, first of all, Home Secretary James Cleverly is going to Paris to discuss small boats and illegal immigration with his French counterpart.
Of course, this after the Rwanda bill cleared its first hurdle in the House of Lords last night, with peers voting resoundingly against a motion designed to block it.
That's right. So joining us in the studio is former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Culver Ranger. Good to see you. And former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Arlene Foster. Arlene, should we just talk to you briefly at first about events overnight in Northern Ireland?
Dramatic stuff.
Dramatic.
5-hour meeting.
Yes.
Press conference.
Quite the norm for the DUP.
Of course. Press conference with Jeff Johnson at 1 o'clock in the morning.
I know.
But this is all familiar to you when you were First Minister.
Yeah.
But tell us, I mean, symbolically it's huge, isn't it? Because we've got, for the first time, a Sinn Féin First Minister. For the first time now, we've got someone leading the North who is opposed to North and South, wants a united Ireland.
Well, you say she's leading, but of course the office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister is a joint office. So the Deputy First Minister, whoever that is going to be on behalf of the DUP, will have exactly the same powers as the First Minister. Not taken away from the symbolism, and I think people will, of course, want to comment on that.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have any more powers than the Deputy First Minister. But it is
the symbolism, because, of course, Sinn Féin was always seen as the political wing of the IRA.
Yeah, indeed. And for many people, it'll be very, very difficult indeed when she becomes First Minister, because they've been working towards this for quite some time now. But, as I say, it's a mandatory coalition. Everybody's in the executive, all of the different parties, and Sinn Féin and the DUP will be in that First Minister's office.
So we get power sharing back. Does it mean that Northern Ireland is still effectively in the European Union single market?
Well, I think what we've seen over this past 2 years, the DUP left the executive in February of 2022. I've got my dates right. And they did that because they felt that nobody was listening to them about the problems of the protocol. There then came along the Windsor Framework. The Windsor Framework, as you remember, was sold very hard, that it was going to solve all of the difficulties. I said at the time, and I continue to say, that it was completely oversold. So since then, the DUP and the government have been trying to find other ways to deal with the problems, mainly about the internal market of the United Kingdom. We've talked many times about the barriers between GB and Northern Ireland for goods circulating around the UK.
Have to go through all these checks.
Exactly. So today, Jeffrey Donaldson has been saying that this deal deals with that issue about the internal market of Northern Ireland, and that's good for the Union. And if that is the case, and we will see some legislation tomorrow, I understand, from the government, we will get a clearer picture of what the detail is in relation to this. But I think that's good for Northern Ireland. And of course, devolution is good for Northern Ireland as well, and our place within the UK. So I think it'll be interesting to see the detail, but I think it's a good...
And the 3 billion bung?
Oh, it's not a bung. Now, come on, Andrew. We've talked about this many, many times. It's what's due to the people of Northern Ireland. And actually, the Secretary of State was using that, remember, to try and push people into the executive. And I said that wouldn't work because people don't take to that sort of behaviour. But what will happen now is that they'll be able to deal with those pay increases and conditions. And I think that's really good as well.
And talking of one big political discussion that went on for hours, the Rwanda bill yesterday in the Lord's Culvert. How was it? How was the mood in the House? And also, what does this now mean for Rishi Sunak?
Well, Bev, you said it felt like Wednesday today. It feels almost like Thursday. We had the big debate on Rwanda, and then we had, obviously, the DUP discussions last night. Look, the Rwanda debate was interesting from the perspective that the Labour Party had decided that they were going to abstain anyway. So this bill was going to go through. But it gave an airing to a lot of the different concerns at some of the different sides of the House and individuals. It's really about individuals. The House of Lords, as I'm getting used to it, it's less party-driven, more individual and thoughts. I think we saw a lot of moral high ground being taken by a number of people.
Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yes, and I was there to listen to him.
My favourite.
Does he not have a right to take the moral high ground when he's the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Pity he doesn't do it more in his pulpit in the church.
But I've got to say, I listened very carefully to Lord Frost, Dave Frost as well, and he made a reference to the Archbishop's comments that, yes, we agree in sort of the proposal that the church says, you know, embrace the stranger, etc., etc., but it doesn't make for a political solution. And these problems, as we know, this problem about illegal immigration is not just here and now. This is growing across the world and will continue to grow in the years and the decades that follow. We have a very difficult political challenge to look at, and we have to find new ways of solving this. And the Archbishop said, we can do better. But nobody is coming up with better. So we have to start somewhere. Including him, yes. And there's that issue about the church and politics as well, which does come up. But it was good to have the debate. It's good to hear all sides of the House. I think there is the view that there shouldn't be, the House of Lords should not be frustrating the will, the democratic will of the House of Commons. Now, yesterday, the Liberal Democrats tried to do that. And that is not on. Even me, as a newbie in the House, know that that's not on. We do not have that.
Arlene, Lord Renard, who was the Chief Executive of the Lib Dems, he had a letter in the FT last week saying we can, under the rules, delay this bill for a year. That would be an outrage.
Well, it is an outrage, and Culver and I are relatively new Lords, so when you look at becoming a Lord, you look at what the purpose of the House of Lords is. And for me, the House of Lords is there to try and make laws better. If they come from the Commons, how can we make it slightly better? Look at the arrangements, but not to block the will of the people. And you know, that's what it's about. So I was very pleased that last night the bill went through because it came up from the Commons. The Liberal Democrats tried to stop it. 84 votes were given to try and block it. It didn't work. But, you know, we need to look at other countries as well. Italy has just agreed to look at Albania as a way of dealing with their migrants after the court. So, I mean, this is not unique.
No.
People are trying to argue it's unique. Is it the best way forward? Possibly not. But as Culver says, there hasn't been anything else brought forward, and we can't keep going on the way that we're going.
Am I right in thinking you've also had a bit of a briefing yesterday at the Conservative Party?
Yes, it was a busy day, yes.
With your plan to go forward to win the next election.
Yes. That's interesting.
What is the plan to win the next election,
Culver? Well, the great strategic brain that is Isaac Levido, and Isaac Levido is the man who's now charged with coming up with a strategy for the Conservative Party, briefed a number of Conservative peers yesterday. And there is always a pathway to victory for any political party, but it's how are we going to do that? What's the messaging? What's the challenge? And he had a lot of data, a lot of information. You know, data-driven is the phrase around all of these things nowadays. The real interesting point that stuck to me was, out of the people that voted for the Conservative Party in 2019, it appears about half are still with the Conservative Party, but the remaining half, a significant chunk, about 20 to 25%, are wavering. They haven't decided. It seems 12%, but actual figures are looking to vote Labour, but you could still get some of those back. So what it does say is that it's still all to play for the Conservative Party. But one of the key messages that he was saying was party discipline. There is good messaging. There's a plan. Obviously, we know that Rishi Sunak is very clear on his priorities, what he's trying to deliver, how hard he's working on that. He's got a cabinet behind that. But the rest of the party, I think, that's the challenge in the coming weeks and months. And need to stick with that.
And look, on the front page of The Guardian today, Arlene, don't know if you've seen it, Kemi Badenoch, Business Secretary, seen by many as the next Tory leader, Michael Gove, they're in a WhatsApp group called Evil Plotters. Doesn't that say a lot?
Can I tell you, the COVID inquiry tells us all about WhatsApps, but my goodness, there seems to be an enormous amount of WhatsApp groups within the Tory party, you know, all given different titles. Look, Jeffrey Donaldson said last night after the deal and after there was a bit of commentary from other unionists about what had happened, that you know, unless you have a united party, you don't win elections. And it's the same with the Tory party. If you have a united party, if you're on a message and you know where you're going, you have a plan, then you will win elections. If you don't, then you're going to lose the election. And they know that.
Yeah, that's the really interesting thing about what Keir Starmer has done with Labour.
Sure.
They don't have a plan. They're not really presenting a plan. No. But they are doing well at presenting a party that's sticking together at the moment. I think that's a change. But the question is, when they do put a plan on the table, when they do put ideas on the table, will their party stand behind it?
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that people vote. I don't believe it. And nobody that I know, no normal person in the world goes, I'm going to vote for the party who are united. They don't care about the Westminster bubble politics of whether
Oh, no, I don't agree with that.
not.
I think if they're fighting each other the whole time, people just think, I'm not listening to them.
A plague in all your houses, I'm not voting for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they want to see a party that are competent, know what they're doing, they have a plan.
But there are so many reasons to think a plague on your houses at the moment that maybe that's the problem.
Right, but I think what they say is that if they're arguing within each other, they're not working for me.
Exactly right.
They're not delivering for me.
That's
So
the
that's
point.
the discrepancy.
What about,
Talking of arguing politicians, let's just have a look at what happened on Patrick Christie's last night. He was interviewing Baroness Kennedy.
Labour peer.
Legal immigration, though, and that's different, isn't it? Legal immigration we're talking about. And actually, we are worse off GDP per capita. We are not doing better GDP per capita, and you must know that.
Sorry, I've got to go back into the chamber, and I really find that you're not someone who debates in a fair way, and you should do. It's disgraceful. You're not an interviewer that I respect, and I'm going to close this down now.
Okay.
It's so disappointing when people play the man and not the ball. I mean, she's obviously run out of arguments.
She's a very, very, very accomplished lawyer, so she's used to gladiatorial, inquisitorial debates and disputes. I'm astonished that she behaved like that.
I think one of the things I'm finding, there are plenty of lawyers in the House of Lords that...
Perhaps too many.
When they talk to each other, they're fine, but let them meet the sort of
real
public
world.
or the real world or someone like Patrick who's very good at getting to the point.
He is.
I think that's where it becomes hard for them to then have the debate. And there is a difficult debate here because actually the public wants something done about illegal immigration. They don't want to see more people drowning in the English Channel. They don't want to see us spending £8 million a day housing people illegally. So we've got to do something, and I think that's where people who are fighting this bill have a problem.
I mean, in Ireland, it's a massive problem now, isn't it? And bigger than here, because we're having small disturbances on the streets, civil unrest.
Yeah, we are.
Because of
and the political classes, if I can use that phrase, are saying there's nothing to see here. Everything's fine.
Yeah,
We
all wrong.
100,000 welcomes. It's fine. Don't be talking about that because that's racist. Instead of actually dealing with the problems that are being faced, and this is in rural Ireland as well as in Dublin, because people are being sent to Galway and Mayo and places like that, and it's actually changing the nature of those places. And the people who are living there feel helpless at the moment. So there is a problem. It's bubbling away under the surface at the moment, but I would be fearful for what will happen if it comes up.
Very interesting.
OK, super. Right, Corvette, Arlene, thank you so much this morning for joining us. Still to come, we're going to be talking to an inspirational GB News viewer who's campaigning for more research into brain tumours after her 5-year-old daughter, Mercy, was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumour. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 10:24. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
King Charles and Prince of Wales both returned home yesterday after their time in hospital post-surgery.
The King was smiling as he left the premises with the Queen after 3 nights of medical care following his enlarged prostate operation.
Well, joining us now to give us the latest is our royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who is at Windsor Castle. Cameron, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. Yes, it was a bit of a contrast in terms of exits from the 2 members of the royal family. It's thought to be around 11 o'clock yesterday that the Princess of Wales left the London clinic in private with the Prince of Wales. Aides were spotted about half an hour later in other cars with various flowers, including what was pictured some white orchids, presumably for the Princess of Wales. Kensington Palace said in a statement that she is making good progress. It's also thought that the royal children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, did not actually visit their mother in hospital, which means presumably the first time they saw their mother in person for almost 2 weeks was when they arrived back from school here in Windsor to Adelaide Cottage, where the princess is expected to recuperate for up to 3 months. We're not going to see her really until Easter. Prince William has been very much a full-time dad. He has also not been undertaking duties, as we know, but he has had help from a nanny and, of course, the in-laws Carol and Mike Middleton. As for the King, totally different story. A very public exit. He was all smiles, waving to a jubilant crowd with the Queen as well when he left the front entrance of the London clinic on Harley Street. He's expected to spend less time convalescing, around a month or so, but he is very much continuing with royal duties behind the scenes, going through government papers, reading minutes of cabinet meetings and, of course, signing off any official documents he needs to do so. But he's not going to be seen in public for around a month. Queen Camilla, she is going to be in Windsor Castle today, keeping calm and carrying on the centenary of St Mary's Doll's House. She's going to be celebrating. But of course, it does highlight the fragility of a slimmed-down royal family, because we've had these two senior royals in hospital. Yes, it's positive news they're both back at home convalescing now, but it's still only Queen Camilla who's out and about in terms of senior members of the royal family. So it really does show the slimmed-down monarchy and the fragility of that.
Thank you very much, Cameron. What a lovely day to be outside Windsor Castle.
It's a fantastic spot, you know. I was there
Great
for the
place.
marriage of Harry and Meghan, when people seemed very pleased to embrace that woman into the royal family. How
When you
times
say you were
change.
there, you weren't on the guest list.
No, I was there reporting
that.
it, covering it as a reporter. No, I don't think I'd have got on the guest. I don't think I wanted to go particularly. It was nice. I was on the mile watching.
Oh, it's lovely up there.
Terrific. Now, brain tumour campaigners have handed in a petition to Downing Street calling for more research into the disease.
One of our viewers, Lorraine Cuthbertson, got in touch with us, and she's calling on the government to do more, as her daughter Mercy is 5 years old and has a terminal brain tumour.
Well, Lorraine, we can talk to Lorraine now. Lorraine, good morning to you. How is Mercy, first of all? How's she doing?
She's doing all right, thank you. She's a lot better than she was a couple of months ago, where she couldn't walk or speak. She then had radiotherapy, and now she's got some mobility back and she's talking again. So, touch wood, she's doing okay at the moment.
Lorraine, it's my heart is broken for you, actually, because I can only imagine what you're going through. Just tell us, as a mum, what were the signs that Mercy was unwell, and how quickly did you get that diagnosis?
So the signs were she began to have balance issues. She said she had headache, she was feeling dizzy, and basically she was taken to the RVI at Newcastle. She had an MRI scan in the space of about 2 or 3 weeks from, you know, noticing these symptoms to getting out of hospital. And that's when mine and her dad's life just imploded. Yeah. We were told that she had a brain tumour. It was inoperable. There was no cure. And we were offered a standard course of radiotherapy to try and maintain her mobility and her functionality in her day-to-day life. And very quickly we had to educate ourselves as much as possible about how we can try and fight this, you know, and prevent her declining again to what she was like a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But you didn't give in there, did you? So you started fundraising, Lorraine, and how much have you raised, and what does it mean? Can you take her somewhere else now for treatment?
That's correct. There's not a lot of investment in brain tumours in this country, so we knew very quickly. We were supported by a charity called Abby's Army, who opened our eyes to what options were abroad. So we had to start fundraising. It's not cheap, it's very, very expensive. We started a Just Giving campaign, which is still live for Mercy, and started Mercy's Mighty Fight on social media. We've raised £90,000 with £10,000 off the target of £100,000, and that is so we can go abroad and fund clinical trials for Mercy that aren't available in this country. So you're looking at countries in Europe and places like America, where they have a lot more clinical trials and a lot more investment in this sort of illness for children, because there's a lot of families going through this and your options are extremely limited in this country. So we have to fundraise. We haven't got another option. We're just not going to give up. It's not an option for us to give up.
And brain tumours are becoming more and more common, aren't they, across the world, Lorraine, and also in this country. And what would you want the government to do? Does it feel like a neglected area of medicine to you?
I think it needs to become more of a priority. You know, the research into brain tumours is very low. The spend by the government is very low, but it represents one of the biggest killers, cancer killers, of people under the age of 40 is brain tumours. And it's something that people don't speak about. It's almost like a silent thing that people don't speak about. Yeah. And you don't choose this world, it chooses you. So we didn't choose our daughter to be diagnosed with a brain tumour. But when it comes into your life, you very quickly have to get to grips with what you're dealing with. You can either fight it, or you can either curl up in a ball, we're fighting it. And, you know, the government needs to invest more money so that when families like ours, working families, get this diagnosis, they're not having to fundraise, they're not having to do Just Giving campaigns. The needs of the patient are met from the outset. And this can only be done by accelerating clinical research to improve patient outcomes.
So just remind our viewers, Lorraine, where can they donate, help you get to that £100,000, help you get on that aeroplane? What's your website?
It's Just Given. If they go on Mercy Cuthbertson on Just Given, it'll bring up Mercy's Just Given page. Our Facebook is Mercy's Mighty Fight. And again, the links to the Just Given are there, but Mercy Cuthbertson on Just Given.
OK.
Lorraine, let us know how you get on. When you reach that 100,000 figure, come back and talk to us again, and send our love to Mercy and to you and your family.
Wishing you lots of strength.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Mercy's Mighty Fight.
Amazing.
But
it's so sad that with this extraordinary NHS, the extraordinary things we can do about, we can't help a 5-year-old girl with a brain tumour.
Awful.
Isn't that sad?
Right, lots more to come this morning, but first, Sam Francis has your very latest news headlines.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much, and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 10:30. The headlines. Northern Ireland's top unionist party have announced they will end their boycott of the government and return to power sharing. The party has refused to take part in government at Stormont for more than 700 days in protest against post-Brexit trade arrangements. The DUP says they'll back a deal if new legislation is passed in Parliament. Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has hailed what he described as the welcome and significant news and made it clear the government will deliver on its end of the deal. Commuters are facing more travel disruption as train drivers launch a fresh wave of walkouts in their long-running dispute over pay. Train operators are urging passengers to only travel if absolutely necessary. The strikes were expected to be the first test of new legislation to enforce minimum service levels. Well, as we've been hearing in the last half hour or so, a man in his 30s who was armed with a crossbow has been shot dead by police in south-east London. Metropolitan Police officers say the man was trying to force his way into a building in Surrey Quays just before 5 o'clock this morning. He was reportedly armed with weapons and threatening to harm residents inside that address. Unarmed officers tried to speak to the man but were threatened. When police marksmen arrived, the man entering the building on that property was then shot. Immigration is due to add an extra 6.1 million people to the UK population by 2036. The latest figures from the Office for National Statistics found the population is projected to hit 70 million by the middle of 2026. That's faster than the original forecast of 67 million. And Elon Musk has announced that the first patient to ever receive a groundbreaking brain implant is recovering well. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in the region of the brain that controls movement. The billionaire says the first goal of the project is to enable people to control a phone or computer just by thinking. And you can get more on all of those stories and many more by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick look at this morning's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2682 and €1.1711. The price of gold is £1,606.09 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,672 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, a path to ruin. That's how the chairman of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, Craig McKinlay, describes the Prime Minister's ambitions to reach net zero targets. Is he right? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
10:39 with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, it was revealed that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak does not eat on Mondays because of intermittent fasting.
He's been following the habit for years to stay in shape and to follow principles in line with his very strong Hindu beliefs, which, of course, encourages fasting.
So joining us now to give us an insight into this, we're joined by Chief Operating Officer for the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, Sunil Sharma. Sunil, good morning. Good to see you. Now, you are also Hindu, I believe. Is that right? You're Hindu. Now, explain to us why this forms part of the religion and the culture and what the significance is of fasting.
Yes, sure. So in the Hindu religion, fasting isn't an obligation, it's more of a moral and spiritual act. So you're not forced to fast, so it's very much a choice that people make. There are certain days that Hindus will particularly fast on, depending on if you effectively what God they pray to the most, or the one they have their biggest devotee. So, for example, Mondays is Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu on Thursdays. So it's very much on sort of spiritual element, just trying to self-discipline is another a part of it as well. So some people do an outright fast, which is what Rishi Sunak does for those 6 hours. Some may not eat meat for Mondays and Tuesdays. It's a kind of concept of sort of self-discipline, if you like.
Are you surprised that it's a 36-hour fast, Sunil? Because that is a long time.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I think I would definitely struggle with the 36 hours. But, it is there are lots of examples about it being a very physical benefits to it. So it's not too far off the 5-2 system, which is, what a lot of people do anywhere in this country. So it's not effectively that abnormal. You see it very popular in sort of I think with even weightlifting or just even in different shapes of life. So there's definitely physical benefits and mental health benefits towards it. And I'm guessing in his sort of job, in terms of the stresses that he deals with on a day-to-day basis, I think this is one thing he can control.
Well, some people say he can be tetchy, and I've seen him be tetchy. I wonder if you become a bit tetchy if you haven't had any food for 36 hours. I think I'd be tetchy if I didn't have food for...
You're tetchy anyway.
You think I'm tetchy, see? But I mean, he has got this reputation for being a bit tetchy. I wonder if that could be influenced by his fasting.
He's hangry.
Well, it could be. He's also teetotal, so that could play a part. I think that the reality is, I think fasting, if he's been doing it for as long as he says he has been doing it for, then I think he would have gone past that period of the tetchiness and the struggles of it. I think it's something that he's done, it seems like, throughout his whole life. And I think it's a good example of him just showing a bit more about himself in terms of who is Rishi Sunak, which is, I think, a big question for a lot of people who, regardless of conservative or not, who is the man behind this person that we see on TV as Prime Minister. So I think it's a good thing that he's opening up into who he is as a man.
And do you know what's in it? I wrote about this actually for the gbnews.com website, which you can go and look at any time after this programme finishes, about this particular story, because I quite like this element of Rishi Sunak, because we are mammals, okay, and we are cavemen. And we forget that we're cavemen. And when you're hungry, you're ready to go out and hunt your woolly mammoth. Now, in his case, it might be take on Keir Starmer, or make some tough policy decision whilst he's primed for action. I quite like this insight into him, actually. Do you think we should know more about him like this? Because it does humanise him, a man that we often say is very robotic technocrat.
Definitely. I think, it's good to see who this person is. I think one of the things, especially in the celebrity culture that we live in now, people are more interested, even if they don't agree with it, even if they don't love it. The fact that we can actually see this as a real person, not somebody who is, has an auto cue or somebody who just read off a script. We're seeing things that are really good about him, and I think it's really interesting to hear more about. I'm obviously a bit biased, but the Hindu side, the cultural side. But then, just even him as a person, I wish he would be more open about this. Just talk about his, even when he talks about his family wealth, be more acknowledged. My parents and my in-laws, and they're very successful. They've made a lot of money. I think this is a good example, and hopefully carries on in this vein.
And Sana, we know he goes to temple, but we don't know much about how often he goes or when he goes. And I understand he's got a statue of Lord Shiva, who you mentioned, actually on his desk in his Downing Street study.
Well, that would make sense because, that he fasts on Mondays, and people who are devotees of Lord Shiva tend to fast on Mondays. So that all makes sense. I mean, I think this is a good opportunity for him to open up about himself and even talk more about his faith. We are I think one of the things that's been lost in the UK is the fact that we are built on Judeo-Christian values. And there is some overlap with some of the Hindu values in terms of the faith. So I think for him being a bit more open about his faith, I think will only help him. And also, I think one of the issues I've seen on GBNews talk a lot about is reactivating that conservative base. I think this is a great example of something that could help reignite that.
Just tell us, the god that he must feel most closely aligned to is the Monday. Was it Shiva?
Lord Shiva.
Lord Shiva, thank you. Is that the Lord, or the god of making your wishes come true? Have I understood that correctly, Sunil?
Yes, I mean, I think Lord Ganesh is the one that's like the elephant god, which is like the best of luck and this sort of stuff. Lord Shiva's a bit more of a destroyer, so it's a bit more destructive. So maybe he's going to use this going forward with Sir Keir Starmer for the election. So who knows? But I think it's fascinating. There's so much to this. I mean, the fasting stuff we could talk about in a lot of detail, but we're seeing a lot of the adaptations of the Hindu culture in Western civilization, the spiritual form, which I think we're much more interested in now with mental health, yoga, meditation. These are very Hindu cultures that have been around for centuries. So it's good to see Rishi Sunak almost embracing that.
Opening up about it. OK, great to see you. Sunil Sharma there, from the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. We have got Dawn Nixon
Really interesting.
and Tonya Buxton in the studio with us now.
Tonya's
Tonya,
a foodie, isn't
you
she?
were nodding away with that because even though you're a foodie, you're quite a fan of fasting, aren't you?
Well, actually, I've gone full circle with fasting, and there is a big differentiation between men fasting and women fasting. And exactly for what you said, because the men were the hunters. And so, actually, they become more alert and sharper with prolonged periods of fasting. But with women, it can have negative effects on their thyroid and bone density and muscle loss. So this is really interesting. Everybody should do a 12-hour fast at night, you know. Finish eating at 7, don't eat again till 7 in the morning. Everyone should do that because it's autophagy, which is you eat off all the bad cells, so it's really good for you. But 36 hours, I used to do that every week.
Did you?
So, yeah, finish eating at 7 o'clock on Sunday night and not eat again till Tuesday morning. And, I mean, I felt really good on it, and you do feel slightly wired on it, but as a woman, it wasn't so great. So I understand why he does it. It's a good thing, especially for men to do, but not so great for women. You need to watch out if you're a woman.
Dawn, you are, for you, your body is a temple. You're up on the...
It is slightly ruined, really, to be honest with you.
But you love your exercise. You're in great nick, aren't you?
Well, I do love my sport. I've always done sport. Pretty similar to yourself, Bev. So, for me, I completely understand what Tonya's saying about fasting, and it does give you a high as well. It really does give you a high, which is dangerous if you're even slightly prone to eating disorders. But for me, if you're training, if you're doing a lot of sport, and I know Rishi Sunak does like his peloton, he does the cycling, doesn't he? So I'm curious to how he balances that with the training that he does. When you're doing a lot of sport, you know, Ben, you're a swimmer, you can't
fast
eat. You need fuel.
He's very influenced in this by his wife, apparently, who's also into fasting. I wonder if the children do too, because they've got two daughters.
On it. I mean, they're both very slight, very slim. But as I said, I think the danger with this story, and I think it's a great story and fair play to him, but I think there are lots of people with eating disorders, men and women out there, who are going, oh, that sounds like basically the back of a good excuse not to eat for 36 hours. I think it's quite triggering as well to talk about these.
Oh,
could it
you
make
can't
him
live your
touchy?
life worrying about people with eating disorders, just like you can't live your life worrying about people's sensibilities.
No,
the reality
I think it's an element of this that does
fair
need
enough,
to be taken into...
but you know, it is good for you to a certain extent. You know, we eat
could
too much.
Could it be the reason he's touchy?
Yes.
That's interesting.
It could be the reason. Actually, initially, you know, so when I used to do these fasts, I was fine in the morning when I woke up, say, so finished eating Sunday night. Monday morning, I'd be fine. Monday, all day, I'd be fine. Towards the end of Monday evening, I would start to get that hangry feeling. So you don't want to be scheduling a meeting with Rishi Sunak Monday afternoon.
And the President of the United States.
No, you don't want to be doing that on
7 o'clock on a Monday evening.
I do like the fact that I feel like we've got to know him a bit through this story. I really do, and I don't think he should shy away from that, actually, from the topic.
The other thing I wanted to talk to Tonya about on this one in particular is he's a big fan of our Coca-Cola drinks, Diet Coca-Cola drinks. Tonya's shaking her head. She's already given me a lecture this morning about having one and how bad it is for you.
But it's full of sugar.
It's not just the sugar.
Sugar-free.
Andrew, it's not just... It's not the sugar. It's the fact that if you drink these carbonated drinks, they leach calcium out of your bones. And we are all ladies of a certain age. We cannot afford to have...
Speak for yourself.
Calcium
Speak for yourself, if you don't mind.
I meant these ladies.
Oh, right. Very glad to hear that.
I was including you as well, to be honest with you.
Honorary girl.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Right, let's talk about the BBC. A couple of big BBC stories in the paper today. So apparently, Dawn, the staff are being told that they shouldn't hire candidates who are dismissive of diversity and inclusion. What do they mean?
But this is ridiculous. I mean, this is guidelines that have been issued by the BBC are telling staff not to hire candidates for jobs who don't subscribe to basically the Gary Lineker school of thought on diversity and inclusion. So if you happen to think that the best person for the job is the best person for the job, regardless of their political views, you can't hire them. You can only hire them if they tick all the right boxes about their views on the transgender issue, on diversity in general. So basically, you have to hire the Gary Lineker fan club.
Well, let me test Andrew Pearce. So this is the question you would be asked.
It's Andrea today, remember?
Andrea. This is the question you would be asked from the recruitment policy document. Explain what diversity and inclusion means to you, and should you be successful, what opportunities do you see for you to promote, celebrate or encourage diversity and inclusion in your role?
I think it's, at the BBC, a total waste of money.
They wouldn't give you the job.
Right, I haven't got the job. Didn't think I'd get it somehow.
I would be the best person for the job. For example, my qualifications are fantastic. I can go in, I can produce a fantastic job, but I would go in and I say, I completely dismiss
Yeah.
diversity and equality. I do not agree with diversity and equality. I reject it.
Yeah.
I believe if you have to have something that's going to make sure that everybody's inclusive, then I would look at some proportional representation. I would look at the statistics of the country, see the percentages of ethnicities around the country and what's going on, and maybe make sure that you have that proportional representation. But this diversity inclusivity is what's turning this country to rubbish. And it's what across the board, not just at the BBC, but across the board. And again, the BBC just need to be defunded. They just do.
And at vast expense as well. And in the NHS, how many times do we see an ad for the NHS for another £50,000 a year diversity officer?
£200,000, rather than, £30,000 for that. But I mean, the thing is with Tonya, they're not diverse and inclusive. I remember going for a long time ago now, to be fair, being told that I wasn't suitable to work as a young journalist to work for the BBC because I was too working class.
Yeah.
No, they didn't tell me directly.
You see
They didn't tell me directly, but a friend who worked there said this was the person that got the job was as qualified as me. They just went to the right university. And
You weren't. I can remember when David Cameron established the A-list to get more women, diversity and gay people into the Tory parliamentary party. I said, did it occur to you to get anybody from a factory on the A-list? Somebody who went to a comprehensive day.
Didn't go to university.
Yeah, exactly, because they are a very important part of the country.
Yeah, and we all pay our licence fee as well.
We do.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to do.
No.
Right, BBC licence fee. Talking of... Oh, no, let's go. Let's do the other BBC story later then. Let's go on to, should you have baby number 3, Tonya? So this is the Green agenda as well, making women feel guilty, couples, if they want to have more than 2 babies.
So this story that was in the Mail yesterday, Dina was saying that she felt so guilty because she's pregnant with number 3. She does all the recycling. She does, oh, God, it was just a wokey, virtue-signalling, massive outpouring. The reality is I wish I had more. I have 4 children. I nearly had 5. I only got 4. I wish I had 6. And the reason I didn't have 6 is because the gap between my 2 lots of children, I was too busy working to make sure that I had enough to be able to bring up these children, enough to be able to support these children. So I think, and we know that the birth rates are down in Britain, so we absolutely should be having more children. But it's the type of parents and the type of family that we need to make sure we have. We need to have children. I need to have children because I support my children. I don't have my children and then automatically expect the government to bring them up for me when it comes to my housing and for childcare and for all of this stuff. I have to do it myself, and that's why I don't have 6 children.
Yeah.
That's the reason I don't have 6 children, is because I couldn't afford to have 6.
We've only got a few seconds, but it's a big decision to make, and I'm not sure you should factor in whether the children are good for the planet or not.
No,
in that
of course
decision.
you shouldn't. I mean, and as Tonya said, I mean, Tonya is a very good parent. She took responsibility for raising her own children, as opposed to expecting the government to do it for her. Who'd have thought it won't catch on, will it? But Tonya, we balance each other out. I don't have any children at all, so I'm sharing with Tonya. So between us, we're ticking the boxes.
Brilliant. Right, Dawn, Tonya, thank you both so much. We'll be back a little bit later. Up next, we're going to be joined by a former minister to Europe to discuss these French farmer protests. Are we going to see similar scenes here in Britain? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Very good morning to you. Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Whilst tomorrow is looking very windy for some of us, today it's actually going to turn largely fine and sunny. Yes, it's a bit of a cloudy start, particularly across central eastern parts of England, with some damp, drizzly weather for a time, but the thickest cloud and the outbreaks of drizzly rain clearing away towards the southeast as we go into the afternoon, with increasing amounts of sunshine following in behind and just a scattering of showers across western parts of Scotland. Temperatures will be around or a little bit below average for the time of year. Many places staying in single figures, but could get to highs of around 10 or 11 Celsius towards the south. Through this evening and overnight, we are going to stick with the largely clear skies across many parts, but turning increasingly cloudy across much of Scotland, and here the winds are really going to strengthen. That's due to a deep area of low pressure just to the north of the UK. That's going to bring some very strong winds as we go through tomorrow. Where we have clear skies across England and Wales, we could see temperatures dipping a little bit below freezing, so a touch of frost and some patches of fog to watch out for first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow and across much of England and Wales, it's actually going to be a largely dry day, but turning increasingly cloudy here. Meanwhile, for Scotland, a very wet picture as a squally front pushes its way southwards, could bring some heavy rain and some snow over the highest ground. That rain then pushing into parts of northern England and Northern Ireland later. Blustery showers following in behind with the risk of some hail, some lightning, and watch out for some very strong winds.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
(11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 30th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning to you. So, rail strikes in England. The Prime Minister demands rail companies use new powers to implement minimum service levels during strikes. They're not doing it, though. Earlier, General Secretary of ASLEF, Mick Whelan, told GB News why they're striking.
And it's been 5 years since some of my members have had a pay rise. We then found out that the people, the privateers that we work for, had done a deal with the Westminster government not to give us a pay rise, and there's a move afoot to rip up our terms and conditions.
Scenes in France, hundreds of farmers' tractors are forming a blockade into Paris. They're vowing to cut off food. They're furious at French and European rules and also the dash to net zero. We've seen similar scenes in Scotland. We're going to see the same across Britain quite soon.
And have we got a small boat solution? The Home Secretary James Cleverly is meeting his counterparts in France this evening, setting out their plans to tackle the English Channel crossings.
And we've got an extraordinary story coming up as MPs hold a debate on road traffic collisions. We're going to be speaking to campaigner Sarah Hope, who's the wife of our very own political editor, Christopher Hope, who 17 years ago was involved in a bus crash which killed her mother and seriously injured her lovely daughter, Pollyanna.
And mortgage misfortune? Well, Tory MP George Freeman has quit his £120,000 a year ministerial job because he could not afford his mortgage repayments. They increased from £800 a month to £2,000. Do you feel sorry for him? Let us know.
And the very day we've got train drivers on strike who are earning £60,000 a year, which I think they shouldn't be on strike, but then you get this full government minister, former minister saying, I can't manage £120,000 a year. How does he expect people to accept lower pay rises in the public sector?
Very interesting, isn't it? gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. That plus more from Tanya and Dawn. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 11 o'clock. Our top story this morning, Northern Ireland's top unionist party have announced they will end their boycott of the government. The DUP has refused to take part in power sharing for more than 700 days in protest against post-Brexit trade arrangements. The party say they'll now back a deal, though, if new legislation is passed in Parliament. Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has hailed what he's described as the welcome and significant news. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says the move restores Northern Ireland's place in the UK.
This package, I believe, safeguards Northern Ireland's place in the Union and will restore our place within the UK internal market. It will remove checks for goods moving within the UK and remaining in Northern Ireland, and will end Northern Ireland automatically following future EU laws.
Commuters are facing more travel disruption as train drivers launch a fresh wave of walkouts in their long-running dispute over pay. Train operators are urging passengers to only travel if absolutely necessary. The strikes were expected to be the first test of new legislation to enforce minimum service levels. Downing Street, though, has said it's disappointed that operators aren't using those powers to reduce the impact on passengers. ASLEF's General Secretary Mick Whelan says the government are giving up trying to resolve the row.
It's been 5 years since some of my members have had a pay rise. We're not looking for a pay rise for the years of the pandemic years. 3 years ago, when inflation started going through the roof, like many other sectors, we asked for a pay rise. We then found out that the people, the privateers that we work for, had done a deal with the Westminster government not to give us a pay rise, and there's a move afoot to rip up our terms and conditions. We still went into negotiations in good faith, and they've behaved despicably.
But Housing Minister Lee Rowley says that the strikes are unnecessary.
When the unions do the right thing for their members, where they're working for their members, that's fine. When they go out on strike unnecessarily, and this rail strike is an unnecessary strike, in my view, that's not acceptable. It's impacting hard-working people all across the country. It's a good example of why the government is taking difficult decisions, why the union-backed Labour Party is refusing to do so, and why the government should stand firm on these instances.
Well, a man in his 30s who was armed with a crossbow, we understand, has been shot dead by police in south-east London. Metropolitan Police officers say the man was trying to force his way into a building in Surrey Quays just before 5 o'clock this morning. He was reportedly armed with weapons and was threatening to harm residents inside that address. Unarmed officers had tried to speak to the man but were threatened, and that's when police marksmen arrived at the scene, and the man entering a building on that property was shot. The UK population could reach nearly £74 million by 2036, with migration adding around 6 million people to that amount. That's faster than the original forecast of 67 million. The latest ONS figures project that 10.8 million people will be born before then, and there could also be an additional 1 million people aged over 85 in the next 15 years. Elsewhere, Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for allegedly leaking state secrets. It comes just days before national elections there. The former cricketer turned politician has already been in jail since August last year on corruption charges, which he says are politically motivated. His lawyer says they don't accept what they're calling an illegal verdict. Back here in the UK, shop prices have risen at their slowest rate for more than 18 months in January. Inflation reached near record highs last year, prompting a cost of living crisis. However, discounts and lower prices for milk and tea saw shop price inflation fall to 2.9% from 4% in December. Overall, prices, though, are still going up in the shops, but at a slower rate. And Elon Musk has announced that the first patient to receive a groundbreaking brain implant is now recovering well. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement. The billionaire says the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or computer just by thinking. And he says the initial tests show promising signs of brain activity in that patient, meaning other patients with paralysis or neurological conditions could one day overcome their conditions. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom for now. We'll be back in the next half an hour with more. In the meantime, we're on TV, digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Very good morning. It is 11:07. Let's see what you've been saying at home. This is about the rail strikes. Pauline in Amersham says, I've just returned from a weekend away by train. At the age of 81, I used the passenger-assisted scheme. It helped me with 2 changes there and back. I cannot speak highly enough of the staff who helped me and assisted with the changes, and it all went very smoothly. These people are never mentioned. They deal directly with the passengers. Thank you, Pauline.
But Michael says if Labour get in, they're going to give in to the unions every time. They've always done so in the past, so why break the habit of a lifetime?
And Julia said it's irrelevant what their pay currently is. This is the drivers, the train drivers. The train drivers have not had a pay rise in years. I think it was 5 years. And if it was anyone else, you would be advocating for a pay rise. I don't mind them having a pay rise. They've not had a pay rise for 5 years and we've had crazy inflation.
I think some haven't had a pay rise. I think it depends which rail company. I don't think it's across the board. Mick Whelan wasn't very specific about that.
No, absolutely. Right, keep your emails coming. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address.
Well, the Home Secretary James Cleverly is on his way. He might even be there now in Paris to discuss, guess what, small boats and illegal migration with his French counterpart.
This comes after the Rwanda bill cleared its first major hurdle in the House of Lords last night, with peers voting resoundingly against a motion designed to block it.
Well, our political editor, Chris Hope, is in Westminster. Chris, that was the government will be relieved that the Liberal Democrats kicked up last night in the Lords, but Labour abstained.
That's right. Well, we were expecting all day yesterday the bill would pass second reading. To be very boring about this, Sandra and Bev. But the key thing we're looking out for is the 12th and 14th of this month. Those are the days when the Lords will sit into the wee small hours debating endless attempts to water down the Rwanda bill with amendments. Now, those amendments are tabled by the afternoon of Friday next week, and then there will be a moment in going into Valentine's Day. There'll be no love and kisses here between the Commons and the Lords. It'll be quite dramatic, I think, attempts to water it down. Lord Lisvane, Robert Rogers, as you know him, Andrew, the former clerk of the Commons, he said last night that there could be as many as 7 exchanges between the Commons and Lords. That means the ping pong, so it goes backwards and forwards 7 times. The key question is, will the Lords accept the bill as the Commons drafted, or will they insist on their amendments and vote it down at some stage at third reading? So, drama. And today we're seeing from James Cleverly. He's the Home Secretary. He's off to France to meet with Gérald Darmanin, who's the French Interior Minister. They wanted to discuss then plans to do better cooperation and enforcing the border across the English Channel. So attempts there by James Cleverly to deal with that. Also, we should hear today later measures of how they're going to get this number of net legal migration down starting in April. So a lot happening today on home affairs and migration.
OK, thank you so much, Christopher Hope there in Westminster. Well, we're joining the studio now by former Labour MP and Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane. Dennis, this idea that James Cleverly's going over there, I think we've given them £500 million. Isn't that what we give them? 500 million we've given the French to stop people coming over in boats. I can't see what we've got for our money.
Bonjour and merci, merci for all the wonderful money you send to us in France to do very little.
Very good.
I'm sorry. I was listening to French radio this morning to prepare myself for the most important interview of the day. No mention of Mr. Cleverly. He doesn't have a high profile there as here. They're obsessed in France, rather, with these giant tractor convoys.
Good reason.
They're like the invading armies. They're all coming up to Paris. They're going to block the equivalent of 9 Elms, the old Covent Garden, and stop France being fed. They've got armoured cars outside there. It's a wonderful.
But French do good protest, though, don't they?
A wonderful protest. What do the French farmers want? They want basically for Lidl to be shut down, for a free trade deal with New Zealand to be abrogated, and at any price they wanted to put on a litre of milk or a dozen eggs or a chicken should be as high as they want to make money. Don't blame them. Can't blame them, but they're taking advantage of this new, inexperienced young Prime Minister.
Also,
I think it'll fizzle out.
I don't think it will fizzle out. It's also partly an anti-globalist protest, because what they're saying is the same restrictions on farmers, taking away farmland, is happening in countries in lockstep across the world. And the only way that they can fight back, particularly under the auspices of net zero, is to come together. This is huge on social media, this story.
No, I'll tell you, I've spent half my brain in France as much as here, and you're quite right. But the problem is, France, number one, is Europe's biggest agricultural sector exporting country. Number two, it is the biggest beneficiary of the EU Common Agricultural Policy. So if they are, to be fair, it was somebody from the racist National Rally, it's called, the far-right party, equivalent of UKIP or BNP in France, I was listening to, and he wanted to get rid of any trade with New Zealand, and then afterwards there was somebody from the Conservative Party, a lady MP, deputy, who said everybody should, I'm doing a French accent, speaking French, everybody should just pay a lot more for their food, and then the farmers would be happy. But France has got not quite as many poor people as we have, but a lot. Every little town in France has got a Lidl. A lot have got an Aldi, and Lidl and Aldi, as they do into Britain, bring in food from all over, mainly poorer European countries.
Called free trade.
It's called free trade. It's difficult to sort of be against it. Now, if the French get their way, and everybody else starts blocking French wine, and I like English wine, but could we have? I'd like to have a glass.
A bit more expensive. But a lot of it also, Dennis, they're upset about the government's net zero targets for their farmland. They're going to put more trees and more rewilding, solar panels.
Oh, France is, twice the size of Britain, about the same population. It's got an awful lot of land. No, what they're particularly angry about, or this right-wing guy, was the idea of any ban on pesticides. Now, I'm not a farming expert.
But they would say that is that environmental drive at the cost of what? At the cost of their businesses, at the cost of food?
Of cost of not poisoning our rivers. Now, it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off in this country. There are a lot of rows over different forms of pesticides, as there are in the United States. It is a complete trade-off. We have just collapsed a very important deal with Canada, which means about, 400,000 or 500,000 British cars won't be exported to Canada. Why? Because the British government wouldn't accept any hormone changed beef from Canada. And I support them on that. Sorry, I'm not going to do an anti-government thing on that. The price of that is our British car workers who've got nice exports of Jags, things, good cars we built here that are sold in Canada, now could be in trouble. So I completely agree. All of these trade issues are interlocked, but what you can't solve it by, in my view, is each country saying, well, we'll put up barriers to the things we don't like, but by the way, you have to accept anything we want.
But this is spreading. This has happened in Poland, in Holland,
Germany.
We saw a small outbreak of unrest in Scotland. I mean, this could be coming here.
What, English
Scottish farmers.
Scottish tractors, but Scottish tractors.
Fed up with net zero and the fact that they're going to have to give up some of their land for environmental measures.
That undoubtedly is
and because but they have a Scottish government, of course.
That is a big question. And I saw a piece, I think, in the slightly left of centre Observer by one of their big economics writers saying, could net zero cost the British economy, an awful lot of money.
It is.
Now, it is.
And families,
but
too.
The alternative price is my youngest granddaughter celebrates her first birthday next week. She'll be there long after I'm gone, but will Britain, even the planet, in terms of being an inhabitable place? I don't know.
But while we're fiddling at the edges, but costing families an awful lot of money and companies and businesses, Dennis, China are doing nothing. They're opening more and more coal mines. Brazil don't care. They're pumping more stuff into the atmosphere. So are India. And yet little Britain does its bit, and it's really hurting families.
So does America, and Canada does its bit, New Zealand does its bit, and all of Europe does its bit. I completely agree. But again, if our answer is to withdraw from every international relationship, that suits China just fine. That suits Modi in India just fine. He doesn't want to be put under any kind of global pressure.
Well, it's not working, is it?
Well, it's working.
They're carrying on in their own sweet way.
They are, as we do, in our own sweet way, in certain areas that, we just don't change anything. So it's a giant global debate, and believe me, I don't think turning our backs... I mean, the people who think the most like us in the world, on the whole, are our fellow Europeans, same culture and civilization for hundreds of years. Few wars now and then, but broadly, system of law, respect for law and everything. That is a European and North American tradition. So that's why, very gently, without talking about return or rejoin or anything, I'm very pleased to return to the first question. James Cleverly who's a nice man, is in Paris talking to Gérard Darmanin, who's a very tough guy. There's some row over whether Britain honoured its agreement to help on the money and the financing of the work on the Channel or the Straits of Dover coast. And it's absolutely right, and we need a lot more contacts with our European partners. We've had a lot more under Rishi Sunak than ever under Liz Truss or Boris Johnson, to be fair. And if there is a change of government, and we're not talking about that today, I'm very convinced that there'll be... It's the 120th anniversary of the Entente Cordiale this year. Maybe that's a chance to mend a few fences with France. But I think across the board, without rejoining, just put that on one side, we've got to start having a better relationship with our closest partners, neighbours, who see the world much as we do.
We were talking earlier to Culver,
Ranger.
Thank you, Ranger. And the Conservatives had a little briefing last night about how the laws and how to win the next election and what they need to do. And there is a sense that it is not a done deal, and that actually, but what we were discussing then is that it isn't necessarily that Keir Starmer is the attraction. Voters are undecided, and they're not feeling that the Conservatives are representing their values. Looking in your crystal ball, how do you see the next sort of 10 months?
I think it's steady as you go. Winston Churchill famously said of Clement Attlee, a taxi drew up with the Prime Minister inside it and it was empty. Yeah. That was just a stupid insult for a man who stood by Churchill for 5 years during the war,
he was Deputy Prime Minister.
The working class, mobilised factories while Churchill was doing the grand stuff with Roosevelt and Stalin. And I think Keir Starmer he's not that exciting. My God, we've had non-stop excitement in British politics since Brexit, haven't we? How many Prime Ministers? Did I hear you? No, it was on the radio this morning. There was a transport minister on, and the poor lad was the 16th.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Now, I don't think we just want to park the Sunak excitements, the Liz excitements, the Boris excitements, I can't really say Theresa May excitements, but you know what I mean, and just have a period of calm repair short.
Might we get a policy from your leader at some point?
Yes.
That he doesn't change next week?
Yes, the policy is very, very clear. It's what I call repair shop politics. We've got to put Britain into the repair shop. So much isn't working in this country, and bit by bit, no flashy stuff. I mean, a lot of very interesting... I've just published my diaries, as you know, Adrian, of the Blair government, 1970 to 2001. And when Blair came in, he came in with an incredible number of Christmas tree presents. There was going to be a parliament. It was a Parliament of Scotland returning a mayor. We were going to sign a social charter. We were going to have independence for the Bank of England. We were going to abolish all the anti-gay laws that the Tories had still kept in place. We were going to make peace in Northern Ireland. We were going to bring in this minimum wage. Bang, 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 bang. And I must say, the Labour Party liked it. Now, I can't see anything like that in the Starmer offer, but actually the nation doesn't need fireworks now. It needs just solid repair work.
Quite hard to argue with that, Dennis. Thank you so much, Dennis McShane. Right, still to come. Shouldn't we be coming down harder on people using their mobile phones whilst driving their cars? We're going to be talking to Sarah Hope next, the wife of our political editor, Christopher Hope. Their family was involved in a serious road tragedy. It is an extraordinary story. Don't miss it. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
(11:24). With Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, a female police officer who killed a lorry driver on the motorway after crashing into him while on her phone has been spared jail this week.
Jamie Bellaby hit Stuart Murphy's lorry at 75 miles an hour while she was texting and calling.
Now, someone else who knows about a similar horror crash is Sarah Hope, the wife of our very own political editor, Christopher Hope.
Back in April 2007, 3 generations of the Hope family were supposedly meeting their new baby cousin, nephew and grandson. But without warning, a London bus ploughed into Sarah, her mum and her daughter.
That's right, it left her and her daughter, Pollyanna, with serious injuries, and Sarah lost her mother in the accident as well. So joining us now is Sarah Hope, MBE, in Westminster. We're much more used to seeing your husband, Christopher, there, Sarah. She did send a message saying she'd borrowed his makeup brush this morning, which is probably not a sentence you ever thought you would utter. But you've been through a heck of a time in the last 17 years, and now you campaign on this issue, don't you? Where do we start? Can I just have your reaction, first of all, Sarah, to this case this week of the driver who was texting, WhatsApping, looking on Facebook, and her crash caused the death of that driver? What did you think when you saw that sentencing?
Absolutely awful. I mean, it's just terrible that things the reason I've launched a petition for there to be a victims commission for road crash victims, because I do not believe that enough has changed even in 17 years since our crash. And it is appalling that happened. And that driver should have gone to prison for a very long time. What's a deterrent for bad driving if people are being let off like this? It's awful. And what justice is there for that poor family? I mean, it's just appalling in every way.
It's not unusual either, is it? Because I was digging out, I remember Lord Ahmed, who was a Labour peer, he was on his mobile phone in his car on the motorway texting. He struck someone, they died. He went to prison for a mere 12 weeks.
Absolutely, it's absolutely terrible. I'm glad to say, actually, I've been in Parliament this morning at a debate hosted by Selene Saxby MP, and actually my petition was mentioned and my campaigning was mentioned in Parliament this morning, so I'm really pleased. It goes to show the government are listening. But no, I've listened to some really sad stories this morning. For example, there are loopholes in the law that make bad things happen. For example, 79% of crashes are caused by people driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and yet if that driver is in a coma or not able to give permission for his blood to be tested, by the time they have permission for their blood to be taken, but they don't have to have their blood tested, so they can get away with things. You know, it is all wrong, because there seems to be more importance in looking after the perpetrators of these crimes. And what we're not doing is looking after the victims themselves as they try to fight justice. And road crime needs to be treated as real crime, because these criminal drivers, people doing hit and run, speeding, holding onto mobile phones, you know, they know what they're doing. They actually know that they might kill someone or severely injure someone.
Yeah,
and yet they're getting away with it. So many laws need to be not just toughened, but changed completely. And the government need to recognise that road crime is real crime. The Home Office, the Ministry of Justice,
Sarah,
the Department for Transport, they need to come together.
It's the most sort of dangerous weapon that any of us get near, isn't it? Is a car, a vehicle. Just tell our viewers what happened. If it's not too painful for you, if you could go back to that day 17 years ago, what happened to you and your family?
Yeah. My mother, Elizabeth, had come to stay. I remember it so vividly. It was one of those gorgeous sunny days when summer's around the corner. We were going to visit my new nephew at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And we decided to get the bus because the weather was so nice and my mother loved buses. So we were just approaching the bus depot in Mortlake, and there was lots of busyness. There was lots of honking of horns and things, but we didn't really think about it too much. We approached the bus depot, and as soon as we entered on the pavement, a bus, instead of turning right into the depot, just ploughed into us on the pavement. And I was severely injured. My daughter, Pollyanna, was 2. She got flung through the air, lost her leg, and my mother was killed. And I remember it all.
Now, we're looking at a picture of Pollyanna here. You obviously have been on a heck of a journey to bring her particularly back to such magnificent form, and she is now a dancer.
Oh, she loves dancing. Yes, there she is with her brother and sister, Barnaby and Sapphire. Yeah, I've been so supported by my wonderful family and wonderful friends, but what the government don't recognise is the impact of these terrible crashes. Why is a road crime treated as less than any other crime? You know, I hear the most terrible stories. Today I heard a story about a family of 3 that were killed, and yet the driver pleaded guilty, and because he pleaded guilty, he got 10 years, and then he's probably out after 7. And then one of the things that needs to really change is the government needs to look at driving bans. You know, if somebody's killed someone and they then have a lenient sentence and they come out, more often than not, they are allowed to drive again.
Wow.
Only 4 lifetime driving bans have been given out in the last 7 or 8 years.
4
It's
lifetime
terrible.
driving
People are allowed to
bans.
keep driving.
Extraordinary. And the point is,
Yeah. There's
and of
so
course,
much the government need to do.
Are they listening, Sarah? Are they listening to you?
No, I don't think they are. Because I think there's a lot I work for Transport for London. I've set up something called the Sarah Hope Line, which is an instant support line to help victims of road crashes in London, and we help people on the whole of the London network. But we're not doing enough for the long-term impact for those people. No, I write to the government and I haven't heard back. I written to the Labour government, I haven't heard back. No, I still don't think it's until the government change their perception of the way they think about road crime, it's going to be very, very difficult. And there's so many brilliant campaigners. So many people, when they suffer terrible road crashes or they are bereaved by a road crash, they then have to become the campaigners themselves.
Yeah.
They have to launch appeals into the sentences given to those people that have essentially murdered their family member. Because the sentences are so short.
So you've got a petition running at the moment, Sarah, and how can people sign it?
Yes. It's going to come up on the screen, I hope, and I would love you to sign it because we need a victims commission for road crash families, because there are so, you know, according to Break, the road safety, one of the road safety charities, you know, 16 people today are going to be either killed or injured, seriously injured on UK roads. So the number of victims there are, and if you think about the numbers of families, you know, it's just too many. And also, I'm very concerned that if the penalties and the sentences are not harsher, what deterrent is that for bad driving?
Yeah, and what deterrent is it to put down your mobile phone while you're driving and not answer that text message?
Well, it's illegal.
Everyone should put their mobile phones and just put your mobile phone on your back seat.
Yeah.
You know, don't do speeding because, you know, 20 is plenty.
Yeah.
Is there for a reason in cities, because you can kill somebody at 30 miles an hour.
OK, Sarah, great to see you. Great to see you. We have to move on. And no doubt we'll be seeing a lot more of your husband, Christopher Hope, on our channel.
And good luck with the campaign. Good luck with the
Thank
campaign, Sarah. What a great campaign this is. And, you know, I was sitting opposite Chris at the Daily Telegraph. We were working together at the Telegraph when he took that call. I'll never forget it.
Yes.
Look of horror on his face. And he ran out of the office. And little did I know what a nightmare was unfolding in his life.
Yeah. Right, still to come. We're going to be hearing from you at home about what you make of train drivers going on strike over their pay, that and much more after your morning's news.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much, and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 11:30. Northern Ireland's top unionist party have announced they will end their boycott of the government and return to power sharing. The party has refused to take part in government at Stormont for more than 700 days now in protest against post-Brexit trade arrangements. The DUP says they will back a deal if new legislation is passed in Parliament. Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has hailed what he described as the welcome and significant news and made it clear the government will deliver on its end of the deal. Commuters are facing more travel disruption as train drivers launch a fresh wave of walkouts in their long-running dispute over pay. Train operators are urging passengers to only travel if absolutely necessary. The strikes were expected to be the first test of new legislation to enforce minimum service levels. A man in his 30s who was armed with a crossbow has been shot dead by police in south-east London. The Metropolitan Police say the man was trying to force his way into a building in Surrey Quays just before 5 o'clock this morning. He was reportedly armed with weapons and threatening to harm residents inside the address. Unarmed officers tried to speak to him, but were threatened when police marksmen arrived, and the man entering a building on the property was shot. Immigration is due to add an extra 6.1 million people to the UK population by 2036. The latest figures from ONS found the population is projected to hit 70 million by the middle of 2026. That's faster than the original forecast of 67 million. And Elon Musk has announced that the first patient to receive a groundbreaking brain implant is now recovering well. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in the region of the brain that controls movement. The billionaire says the first goal of the project is to enable people to control a phone or computer just by thinking. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of the markets. The pound will buy you $1.2677 and €1.1695. The price of gold is £1,605.59, that's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,676 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon. Good afternoon, Britain, with Tom and Emily, and they've joined us in the studio. Emily, we didn't organise this. We have our matching dresses on. We really need to start.
It happens about 3 times a week. That I know you've got
you've matching got shirts, almost matching ties, pink and pink.
Andrew and I clearly we coordinate. We did last night. I'm sure you did too. Pink ties, pink dresses. How lovely! But coming up, this shock. Well, the ONS. Saying they've projected that the population will increase by nearly 10% by 2036, an increase of 6.1 million people due to immigration.
That's the population of Scotland.
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary number. But perhaps what's the most extraordinary thing about it is that this is due to migration, not due to birth rates, because we know that birth rates in the UK have been falling. We're less than replacement in terms of birth rates, so we're plugging all of these gaps with migration. Is that the right mix? Is that the right way that we should be trying to ensure that we can fund things like pensions?
Do we know what countries they expect people to come from? Is that a bit of a mean question, maybe, at this stage?
That is quite a mean question at this stage, but we do know that we've been seeing big increases from places like India. Of course, India now the most populous country in the world. Although, interestingly, we're also looking at this new sort of policy with regard to social housing. We know that those born outside the United Kingdom make up 17% of social housing, or 17% of those from the outside the UK are in social housing compared to 16% of those born in the UK. But interestingly, there is a big divergence of people depending on where they come from. So only 6% of Indians are in social housing. That rises to over 20% of people if they come from Bangladesh.
The issue is now Tom talks a lot about the fact we can't build anything in this country. How on earth do we have the infrastructure to prepare for that?
We don't.
Crazy, in my opinion.
But the housing,
that's before you discuss social issues.
But the housing minister on the rounds this morning, I've forgotten his name, Tom, you remind me who it is, was talking effectively about British homes. British homes. British homes for British people. That's what he was effectively saying. He didn't quite say that. I don't know why that doesn't become a main part of the Tory manifesto.
It's interesting.
It'd be popular.
It's quite difficult in order to enforce this sort of policy because, number one, most recent migrants can't get onto social housing. It's only if they then become British citizens that they can. The big contentious issue is refugees, who of course can get access to social housing from day one and do. So the question is, do we limit it for refugees? The minister was a little bit sort of dancing on a head of a pin on this question this morning. I don't think we've yet seen the clear detail on whether they plan to do so.
OK, all that and more with Tom and Emily this afternoon. For now, though, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Good Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's.
Headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yeah.
Very good morning. You're on the telly, Andrew Pearce. It's 11:43. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tanya's fault.
We've got a serious story there before we come to these two. A man in his 30s, breaking news, was reportedly armed with a crossbow. He's been shot dead by armed police in south-east London.
The Metropolitan Police say the man was trying to force his way into a building in the early hours and was threatening to hurt the people inside.
So let's bring in our reporter, Christina Curtis, for the very latest. Good morning, Christina. Very unusual still in this country for the police to shoot dead a criminal. What happened?
Good morning. So I'm here at the scene in Rotherhithe in south east London, where there's still a very heavy police presence. So what we've been told so far is that a man in his 30s was who was allegedly armed with a crossbow was trying to break into one of the properties, and the armed police shot him. So it was around 5 a.m. this morning that police arrived, where the man was threatening to hurt the people inside the property and trying to force his way in. By the time armed police police arrived, it's alleged that he was actually inside the property and was also threatening officers. Now, armed police took action. They did provide first aid at the scene, but he did pass away. 2 people inside the building did suffer minor injuries. So, as I said, there's a large police presence still here. As we've been here, forensics have been in and out. There's a large cordon in place with police officers strolling the streets as the estate is pretty much closed off. And we've been speaking to local residents. Here's Steve Cornish and what he had to say.
I've lived here 70 years. I was born and bred in the area, and it is surprising. The neighbour is very friendly, all work together, fight a lot for community issues and environmental issues, etc. That's the type of atmosphere you get down here. But obviously this is a major incident in our area, and it shocked quite a few people this morning.
Now, the Independent Office for Police Conduct have launched an investigation, and they said that they have been investigating the circumstances surrounding the fatal shooting of a man by the Metropolitan Police Service. They declared an independent investigation at 6:40 a.m. and they sent investigators to the scene and the police post-incident procedure as they begin to gather evidence. So we'll still remain here and we'll be providing you any updates as we get them.
OK, thank you very much, Christina Curtis, there with the very latest. Now, joining us in the studio, author and political commentator Tanya Brooks and former editor of Daily Star, Dawn Newsroom. Good morning, ladies. And before we talk to you, we want to hear from our viewers because, of course, we are the People's Channel. We love hearing what you think at home.
And this is what a lot of you had to say about the latest wave of train strikes.
I believe that the rail strikes have been an absolute disaster for everybody. They're extremely well paid. They should get back to work, get on with the job that they're paid for, and if they don't want to do that, then they should leave.
When I hear there's another train strike coming, I think, oh great, here we go again. And quite frankly, I am just sick of them now.
The railway has come so unreliable with strikes. Surely the time now has come where ACAS needs to be involved and get both parties in a room, locked in there, knock their heads together and get it resolved.
Train drivers are some of the highest paid and luckiest workers in the country, and they are killing the industry.
Well, I think that the rail strikes that are still going on is pretty damn shocking, actually. People have to get to work, they have to visit loved ones in hospital, kids have to get to school. Stop striking! You've got a pretty good damn deal as it is. Unions, wind your neck in, please.
Right, well, Tanya and Dawn are here with us. Let's talk about this issue first of all, then. Let's carry on, Dawn. Rail strikes. The British public are so tired of not knowing if we're going to be able to go anywhere on any given day.
I think, yeah, this is the problem. You know, as many people, as we've just heard, are saying that, you know, train drivers, most unions have settled, this is just ASLEF. Most people are not on the wages that train drivers are on, so they do not really support these strikes. It's been going on and on forever.
20 months now. Dawn.
Yeah, exactly. And I was listening to Mick Lynch being interviewed this morning, and he was saying, well, you know, there was a new offer on the table, and he goes, well, we don't need to go back to our members because we don't think it's acceptable. And then a train driver, it was on the radio debate, a train driver, and he goes, well, I would like to have a chance to have my say on this latest offer, but we're not getting asked. So it'd be very interesting if Mick Lynch would come on the show and ask him, you know, how do you know that you have the support of your members still?
It's Mick Whelan, actually.
Was it Mick Whelan?
Is the RMT.
Mick Whelan, sorry.
He's the other militant.
They're easy to confuse, actually, the two Micks.
But yeah, I mean, the members haven't been given a chance to react, and this is the problem. So how do they know they have?
Because, and of course, if it was put back today, they could be back at work.
They behave like despots, these union leaders. You know, the power's gone to their heads. And if you think about your average nurse gets 23k, and these train drivers are getting over 60k a year.
Yeah.
No one has any sympathy. I have no sympathy for them at all. It's time to stop and just get on with the job.
And you saw what the GB panel thought.
Exactly. And also, not on top of that, they were, you know, I know I hark back to lockdowns, but, you know, they got all their money during lockdown. We subsidised them completely during lockdown. There should be some payback for that.
Yeah. Even if they haven't had a pay rise in 5 years, Tony, just playing devil's advocate here?
Well, I think they were getting too much to start with, and they're lucky to get that type of wage anyway.
And they didn't lose their jobs during lockdown.
They didn't lose their jobs during lockdown. And you've got to kind of, like, compare compare. Compare what a nurse gets to what a train driver gets. How can
they worked the whole way
be?
through lockdown, and some of them died.
Talking about financial hardship, Dawn, MP George Freeman, his former minister, he's resigned because he can't afford his mortgage, but he takes home a very nice salary.
Absolutely. He's on a £120,000 salary, probably plus a few extras. This is the first story ever. I remember someone actually walking away from a job because they need more money. Does that make any sense, really, on Planet Normal?
You mean, so he must have a better offer from somewhere, though,
well,
right?
you would have thought. And basically, I think the bottom line with this story is basically he is going to lose his seat come the general election in any case. So
How very cynical of you, Dawn.
How very cynical, but this could...
Getting ready to abandon ship. I think you'll find also, Dawn, there might be a divorce involved here, which may just have had a material effect on his outgoings and income.
Yes, exactly that. So, I'm very, very cynical about this.
But he does make a serious point, doesn't he, about how these mortgages have gone up from 800 to 2,000.
Yeah, 800 to 2,000 is ridiculous. The mortgages are killing... These interest rates are killing us. They're killing business. They're killing everyone. I'm having to put properties that I've worked for 20 years that I've owned... I was encouraged to buy properties in order to not have a pension, so I've got something for my children as they get older. So now I'm having to sell 2 of my properties to pay a tax bill on money that I have not received because I'm a nice landlord and I keep my rent really down. When the interest rates went up, I had to subsidise them. So I'm paying tax on money that I haven't got, that I've been subsidising, and I'm now having to sell the properties that I was encouraged to buy in order to have a pension for and have some money for my children. It's all down to George Osborne. He changed the rules, and he's absolutely...
I was going to say, George Osborne as Chancellor made it very difficult for second home owners, almost demonising them as if people who have second homes, landlords are rogues like Ratcliffe got thousands, but the average home property owner owns a couple.
Yes, but the point is now, so I'm going to sell those. They'll go somewhere. Someone will put the rent sky high. They're not like me, I was trying to subsidise as much as I could because I've got lovely tenants in and I want to keep the properties. What's going to happen when there's nothing to rent because none of us who had rental properties can afford to keep tenants?
So many landlords are giving up.
The logic, Dawn, behind those sorts of policy changes was so that we didn't have landlords owning lots of properties and that gave more opportunity for people to buy their own house.
Exactly that, and I think Andrew's point there about, most landlords, they're not fat cat landlords.
They're not. They've got maybe 1 or 2 houses.
They have 1 or 2. And my mum was a fat cat landlord for, if you want to put it that way, for a while because when she lost my dad, she moved in with her new partner, so she rented out her little bungalow. And it's like she would be one of those people that are caught in this trap
to do that. Right, one little story which made me smile. This is the idea that you coped with COVID and lockdowns better, Tonya, if you had a religious faith. I've seen this with my own eyes with people that I know. Why?
Well, I think one of the other things to register as well, it's mainly older women. So I don't know whether that
women of a certain age.
Women of a certain age,
which
like
all of us
here.
Not looking at me again, are you, Dawn, Lisa?
I just think it's the case of having a sense of something other to have faith in, and also I think a lot of these people had more trust in their faith than they had in the government, and that's why they didn't get so depressed with the kind of that propaganda. Do you remember? The propaganda was killing people.
I came out of lockdowns with an absolutely renewed appreciation with people of faith, Dawn, than I ever had before, because they sort of looked at Boris Johnson and Partygate, and we're not going to do what you want us to do, we do what they want us to do.
And I do remember popping into our local church when you were allowed to go into church.
That was quite tricky because they were closed for a long part of it, which was an outrage.
And the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen, especially for the older people in our local community, they had hazard tape on the pews. So you could go into church, but we're talking elderly people here. You couldn't sit on the pews because they had hazard tape on there, and that broke my heart. And it still breaks my heart thinking.
And the church leadership was pathetic.
Absolutely,
they did not speak out about it. Where was the Archbishop of Canterbury?
They were grotesque during that time.
Where was the Archbishop of Canterbury?
They were grotesque when it came to their community during that time. Where were they?
I know.
And these disgusting, grotesque rules. I'm still waiting, like Bev, for an apology, because we were right and lockdowns were wrong. And I remember that scene. Do you remember that scene when those boys went to comfort their mum in the funeral? And the funeral director made them move away from their own mother.
I know.
They went mad. Well, we went mad.
There's all sorts of morals to be drawn from that, isn't there? Right, amen. Our show's over. That's it from Britain's Newsroom for today. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you then.
Should antisocial tenants lose their rights to social housing? And frankly, should people with connections to the area be prioritised?
Yes, the ONS has also predicted that the population of the UK could increase by a whopping 6.1 million people. That's the population of Scotland by 2036. There's an increase of 10% of the entire population. Can we cope with it?
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A fine Tuesday for most of us, cloud clearing the southeast, and that will be followed by sunny spells in many places. It's an area of low pressure that is pushing in the North Sea, which contains still some cloud cover across East Anglia and the southeast, some patchy rain as well. So we'll continue to see some light outbreaks of rain or drizzle across Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex. Staying grey here, but brighter skies elsewhere. Plenty of sunshine for the southwest, Wales, the Midlands into northern England, as well as eastern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Just a few showers into western Scotland, but elsewhere where we've got the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough with light winds and highs of 10 Celsius. Into the evening, we'll see the cloud thin and break across the southeast. That will allow temperatures to fall away. And with light winds, a few fog patches will form as well across some central and southern parts. Further north, cloud builds and it turns increasingly wet and windy, especially for the northwest of Scotland, where some heavy rain arrives by dawn. Now, the winds really pick up during tomorrow morning, with the risk across the northern half of the UK of 65-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and for the far north of Scotland, 85-mile-per-hour wind gusts. That could cause some real issues, and we've got the heavy rain pushing south across Scotland into Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales. So a blustery day for many of us, but mild.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get